Good afternoon, everybody. We're delighted that the lockout's over. It's been a long, tedious process, but one that I believe resulted in a balanced, fair deal that will be good for the National Football League and the Kansas City Chiefs. I want to thank our fans for the patience that they've demonstrated throughout the process. And as an organization, we're very excited to get back to football with training camp starting later this week and being able to play a complete 2011 season. With that, I'll take questions.
Clark, was there ever a time that you doubted that it would get done in time to have a
Certainly, as we went through the process over the last 4 or 5 months, my emotions ebbed and flowed, and there were times that I thought we would be able to get it done in the summer, and there were other times where I was afraid we were going to miss games, including potentially some regular season games. So obviously being able to get the agreement put to bed here in July, being able to preserve the entire preseason and all of training camp, I think is a huge win for everybody associated with the league.
Do you feel like there was any misleading or misinformation to the employees back in March when they were told in reference to pay cuts the Chiefs were going to go middle of the road, 32 teams, 16, 17, somewhere in there, and then it comes out that 3/4 of the league did no pay cuts whatsoever?
No, I don't feel like there was any misleading information given to the employees. As part of the CEC, I was aware of the plans of all 32 clubs, and every club had a work stoppage plan, and the majority of those plans did include some kind of action associated with the employees. Some of those plans were announced earlier this year. Many of the clubs chose to wait until the end of the summer when they were going to announce their plans. Obviously, with the labor situation getting resolved, those teams never had to put their plans in place. So I don't feel that our plan was misleading at all.
Do you think it would have been a better idea to do what some of the other teams did and wait until the summer to not deal with the negative PR?
Not at all. We had a plan that made sense for the Kansas City Chiefs. As one that our employees understood. It was something that we felt was the right thing to do. We have a very loyal group of employees who enjoy working for the Kansas City Chiefs, and I know, like everybody who's a fan of the National Football League, they're glad to be back to football.
Are you satisfied that the agreement will continue to keep the smaller markets on a level playing field with the larger markets in the same fashion that we've seen in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that makes the National Football League great, one of the things I think fans of all 32 teams enjoy, is the fact that their team has a chance in any given year to compete for a championship. A big piece of that has been the substantial amount of revenue that the National Football League shares. This agreement and the supplemental revenue sharing that was voted in as part of the agreement last week will ensure that on a go-forward basis. So I think it's very much of a win-win for everybody, including the players. Interestingly, in talking about the subject with the players want all 32 teams to have a chance to compete, and certainly the system we have is going to allow that.
You guys finally, obviously, got the deal done, but at what point did you realize we may be messing with a good thing here? We got a golden goose that's been really, really good to us. Did you ever come to that point where you all looked at each other like, what are we doing?
No, I think both sides had that perspective going back as far as 12 months. It was just, unfortunately, it was hard to get to an agreement, in part because we didn't have a deadline. Certainly, I think both sides were disappointed to walk away from the negotiating table in March. In a lot of ways, it would have been better for us to have stayed in Washington and continued to work to get a deal done at that point. But the dynamics were such where that just wasn't possible. I think it took getting closer to the preseason. It took getting the owners and the players together alone, which I think was really a key to starting the discussions in a direction towards where they got resolved. And I'd like to credit both Commissioner Goodell and DeMar Smith for that idea, because I really think that was the key turning point.
So the lawyers were screwing stuff up?
Well, I didn't say it like that, but we certainly made some substantial progress once the lawyers left the discussions.
How much of a responsibility did you feel going through this negotiation process and representing the smaller market teams in the rooms coming up with these deals?
Well, certainly the first thing that was important was to get a deal that was good for the entire National Football League. But obviously, having my allegiance to the Chiefs in Kansas City, it was important for me that we get a deal that would work for the small market teams. And I think we certainly ended up with one that does. It's going to allow the Chiefs and the other small market teams to continue to be able to compete for championships.
I think there was some frustration level with some of the fans. What is the game plan of winning those frustrated fans back?
Yeah, I think both sides understand that we have a little bit of a job to do with the fans. They've been subjected to the business of football for the last 4.5 months as opposed to the sport of football. And even though some of them may enjoy following the negotiation, I think for the most part they much more enjoy following the building of football teams and the playing of games. And I just think it's important that we both reach out with humility to the fans, thank them for their patience, and take the extra time, whether it's at training camp signing autographs or whatever we can do to show the fans how much we appreciate them.
Do you feel like you've lost a lot of fans during this process?
It's impossible to know the answer to questions like that. We've been successful with our season ticket sales, both on a renewal basis and also new season tickets. But certainly, I have to think this process, was a turnoff to fans to some degree. I'm hopeful that since we were able to preserve the entire season, including the preseason and including training camp, and having the opportunity for our fans to come up and see us in St. Joe at training camp, that we'll be able to build that bridge quickly.
How will the revenue be split between the players and the owners? I've seen 47, I've seen 53, and speak a bit, if you will, about the supplemental revenue.
Sure. I'll start with the split between the owners and the players. The deal calls for the players to receive a minimum of 47% over the 10 years, and there's a band on that amount that really ranges between 46.5% and 48.5%. So that'll be the split over the 10 years. Would expect it to average somewhere between 47 and 48%. And then with regard to the supplemental revenue sharing, that's a relatively small program that moves a little bit of money from the top teams, the big market, high revenue teams in the league, to some of the low revenue teams.
But since you all, with the stadium renovation, doesn't that disqualify the Chiefs from getting some of that revenue? And how do you plan on making that money? Is it ticket sales, concessions, increase ads? What do you plan to do?
That's right. The supplemental revenue sharing does have a qualifier provision to it. It actually has several qualifiers. One of them relates to new stadiums or substantial renovations. And a team like the Chiefs, who just completed a stadium project, are not eligible for supplemental revenue sharing. But usually that situation works out fine because a team in a new facility has a chance to move their revenues up, and certainly we would hope to be able to do that here in Kansas City.
Are we talking ticket sales, concessions? Have you guys laid out the specifics of how you hope to do that?
It really, the answer is all the above. It's increasing attendance at the stadium because with greater attendance comes the revenue streams that go with that attendance. So it's not targeted to any one specific area, but we're hopeful to once again put a good product on the field in 2011 and something that our fans will want to come to Arrowhead and enjoy the experience.
Fairly or otherwise, the team over the past few months has been, the Chiefs in particular, not just locally but nationally, has been singled out as one of the more frugal, cheaper organizations in the league. I don't know if that's fair, but that's what's been going on. Does that bother you? Do you feel like you need to combat that, or do you just ignore it?
I think it's a misconception. I can't say that it really bothers me. I know the truth. I see all the teams' numbers, and I know what we spend on different categories of expenses, and we're not one of the most frugal teams in the league. That's just the fact. But sometimes it's hard to change the perception.
And you mentioned on the conference call, I don't know if it's been addressed since then, that parking this year is going up to $27, if I have that right. And you mentioned a lot of that is because of the sports complex raising the fees. But do you, I mean, are you aware that there's a lot of fans, right or wrong, look at $27, say, it cost me $30 just to get in the parking lot? And that's something that turns a lot of people off.
I understand and appreciate the sensitivity that our fans have to pricing in general, whether it's parking or ticket prices. And, you know, as we've gone through this tough economic period, we've tried to be cognizant of that. We've dramatically lowered our ticket prices in certain levels to try to make the stadium open to families. We wanted to make sure that we didn't foreclose the opportunity for families to come see a Chiefs game, and that was something that was happening with pricing in the National Football League in general. As a broad statement, our parking prices compared to other NFL teams are probably in the lower half of the league. And the raise that you mentioned this year is one that's triggered by our lease per an agreement with the county. And that money will not go to the Chiefs. That goes to the Jackson County Sports Authority. And it was something that was agreed to 5 or 6 years ago. But certainly the subject of pricing is something we're sensitive to. We're still in a very difficult economic time. I know that there are a lot of families who are hurting, and we want to make sure that we don't close them out of coming to a game at Arrowhead.
Instead of passing that cost on to the customers, I thought of just keeping the parking the same, if you guys taking a chunk of that off and just giving it to
it was something that we obviously could have done. We thought we were better served to attack the issue through the ticket prices because I think families, when they look at coming to Arrowhead, look at the total cost of the experience at the complex.
And to clarify, the entirety of the $5 raise is triggered by the county? Or just
I think it's 90–95% of it. Is it?
A couple more? We're out of time here.
Clark, you talked about all 32 teams worked up their own individual way to handle their employees during the lockout. Some had furloughs, some did nothing. Why did you feel it was important to cut salary?
Well, every team in the league was required to put a plan in place where they could demonstrate to the league office they had the ability to withstand a full year work stoppage as a worst case scenario. And for all the teams, that involved finding a way to save money. And there are a lot of different ways to do it. Obviously, the employees is one of the bigger expenses. Our plan, one of the key cornerstones to it was that we were not going to lay off people because of the work stoppage. We felt that was more important, that we provide an opportunity for the employees to stay with the team. And we also felt that we were better served by communicating the plan to the employees early and spreading the impact over a long period of time, as opposed to having a very concentrated impact for those teams whose plans would have kicked in at the beginning of August. So that was just our approach on it. You know, obviously it's in the eye of the beholder, but we think our plan made sense for the Chiefs and our employees.
So was your thought that 80% was better than nothing? I mean, when you talk about furloughs, having to lay people off.
Yeah, and I assume you mentioned 80% as a hypothetical percentage, but yeah, but whatever the percentage was for that employee, yes, that it was better than being laid off or put on leave, yes.
Scott Pioli said this morning that you've been given no limits on spending in free agency. So how aggressive do you feel the Chiefs should be or will be in this free agency period?
Well, I always encourage Scott to be as aggressive as he feels prudent. Scott very much has a mindset on how he wants to build the Chiefs. We do have some cap space, so we're not constrained. We also don't have to worry about meeting the league minimum. That's something that we'll easily meet. So he's going to be able to make decisions that are in the best interest of the football team, really without having to worry about constraints on either side.
Tucker, you want to close this out? You got anything else?
What is the league minimum for the Chiefs this year?
The league minimum this year is a league-wide minimum that's essentially it's the cap. Right. It's right up against the cap.
I guess, and I'm sure this is why you guys had long meetings and lawyers and everything, but how did that mean to even out to get to 99%? that would mean that, well, some teams might have 95, others would have 105. Well, they
Right.
can't go over the cap, can they?
The league minimum is a cash calculation as opposed to a cap calculation, and so the two aren't different. And I think most every team, the Chiefs included, will have a very easy time in exceeding the cash minimum.
Okay, thanks, guys.